Step softly into the haunted woods in this slow-spoken ASMR horror story, where every whisper pulls you deeper into the shadows. You're listening to ASMR 404Found. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. I never planned to come back to Montana, not after what happened out here when I was 17. But somehow the road has a way of bending back toward the places you swore you would never see again, the way a river curves back into the valley it carved 1,000 years ago. I was driving through the Bitterroot Mountains on a long stretch of empty highway with the sun sinking behind the jagged black ridge, when I saw the old wooden sign half swallowed by the weeds. On the shoulder it read, Devil's Lantern Trailhead, carved in deep hand-chiseled letters painted over in some dull yellow that looked almost bruised with time, and for a reason I can't explain I slowed down and pulled off the road. The gravel crackled under my tires, and the forest just seemed to swallow me whole the minute I stopped. The air here has that thick smell of pine and wet soil, but underneath it there's something else, something like copper and burnt leaves, the kind of smell that lingers in the back of your throat like it doesn't belong in the wild. I stepped out, and the world was quiet, too quiet, no wind, no birds, just the crunch of my boots in the gravel, and the faint creak of that sign swinging on its rusted chain. When I was a kid, this trailhead was nothing more than a rumor whispered in gas stations and passed along in truck stops. Folks said hikers went missing up here every couple of years. Not in a way you could chalk up to bears or a wrong turn, but in a way that made the local sheriff lock his jaw when you asked about it. There were stories about lights moving through the trees at night, like lanterns swaying in a slow rhythm, always just far enough away that you couldn't see who or what was carrying them. The trail itself is narrow at the start, hemmed in by thick lodgepole pine, but their bark flaking like old paint. My flashlight barely reached past 20 feet before the dark just ate the beam hole, and my steps felt loud, too loud in the silence. It's strange how the woods at night can press in on you, make you feel like you're walking through a hallway built from trees and shadow. We'd been walking maybe 15 minutes when I saw the first one, a faint orange glow bobbing deep in the woods to my left. It swayed once, twice, like someone was carrying an old oil lantern. I froze and listened. Nothing, no footfalls, no crunch of leaves, just that dim light moving slowly between the trunks. I told myself it had to be a camper or another hiker, but there was no campsite on this side of the range, not for miles. Something about the way it moved was wrong, too smooth, like it was gliding instead of being carried. It kept the same exact height above the ground the whole time. I tried to call out, but my voice sounded flat in the air, like the forest just absorbed it. The light paused, then started coming toward me, slow, steady. My pulse jumped into my ears, and I did the only thing that felt right. I stepped back onto the trail and kept moving forward, not running, but close to Edie. Glanced over my shoulder a few minutes later, and the light was gone. I told myself it must have been some weird reflection, maybe a hunter, but there was no comfort in that thought. The deeper I went, colder the air became, the kind of cold that seeps into your bones, even though the night wasn't freezing. And I started noticing something that made my stomach knot. Every tree trunk on either side of the trail had deep vertical scratches, like something with claws had dragged them downward. At shoulder height, sound came next, faint at first like a whisper through the pine needles. But it wasn't the wind, it was more like breathing, slow, heavy breathing coming from somewhere ahead. I stopped and listened again. My flashlight beam swept the trail, and there it was, a shape. Just beyond the edge of the light, tall, thin, and absolutely still. My brain tried to tell me it was just another tree until it tilted its head. The movement was small, but it sent ice straight through my chest. My hands felt numb on the flashlight. It took one slow step back, then another, and the shape didn't move, not at first. Then I heard it again. That slow breathing, only now it was closer. He turned to keep walking, only to see a faint orange glow ahead on the trail, another lantern bobbing gently. But this time there were two, and they were on either side of the path. Like someone had been waiting for me to reach this point. My legs felt weak. My mind was running in circles, trying to decide whether to turn around and risk whatever was behind me or push forward into whatever was ahead. He did the only thing I could think of. I turned off my flashlight and stood perfectly still. The darkness was absolute, but those two orange lights stayed where they were, hanging in the blackness, like eyes watching me. I stood there in that frozen air with the forest pressing in on me and my breath coming slow and shallow, trying not to make a sound. Those orange lights ahead didn't flicker like fire. They didn't brighten or fade, they just hung there, steady and strange, casting no light on the trail, no glow on the branches, just existing in the black behind me. The breathing stopped for a moment, and in that pause, I thought maybe I had imagined it. Maybe the cold and the dark and the old stories were getting to me. But then there was a sound to my left, deeper in the trees. A kind of low dragging noise, like something pulling through the pine needles. The orange lights ahead drifted just a little closer, and I felt every muscle in my body. Titini stepped off the trail, thinking maybe I could move around whatever was ahead. The soil was soft and damp under my boots, and the smell hit me stronger now. That metallic copper scent mixed with something sour like meat left out in the sun. I kept my steps as quiet as I could, using the dark to hide me. But the forest here was too still to empty. Every sound I made seemed to hang in the air. Then I heard the first voice. It was faint, almost like a child calling out from somewhere far, of the kind of tone that would make you want to answer if you were lost out here. It called my name, not loud, but in a slow, drawn way that made my skin crawl. I didn't answer. I didn't move. I just crouched low in the brush and tried to see. Through the dark, orange light slid across the trail now, like they were searching for something. And the voice came again, this time closer still, my name. But wrong somehow, like each syllable had been pulled apart and stitched back together in the wrong order. I gripped my flashlight in my hand, but I didn't turn it on. The dark felt safer than letting them see where I was. In the forest went completely silent. Even the distant creak of the trees stopped, and in that silence there was a faint crunch of something heavy stepping on the trail. I turned my head and saw a figure step between the two orange glows, tall and impossibly thin, its head almost brushing the lower branches, its arms long enough that the hands seemed to sway. Near its knees, it didn't carry the lights, they just floated near it, like they belonged to the air around it. Each stood there facing where I had been standing on the trail. I realized with a sharp pulse of fear that it was listening along. It tilted slightly from side to side like it could hear my breath. from where I hid. My legs ached from crouching, but I didn't dare move, not until the figure finally turned and drifted slowly down the trail, the orange lights gliding along with. Edie waited long after it was gone, the night air pressing heavier on my chest, the smell lingering like it had soaked into my clothes. When I finally moved, I went the opposite way, back toward the trailhead, but something in the dark followed me. No footsteps, no sound, just that feeling you get when you know something is keeping pace with you out of sight. The trail seemed longer now, the pines leaning closer, like the forest was trying to keep me in. I thought I saw another light far back where I had been, just a single faint glow. Swaying slowly, I picked up my pace, my boots crunching the dirt louder than I wanted, but I needed to be moving. The trees began to thin. I could see the faint gray outline of the trailhead sign ahead when a shape stepped out onto the path, blocking my way. It wasn't the tall, thin figure from before. This one was shorter, broader shoulders, its head covered in something like a hood or a sack, and in its hand was a lantern, but the flame inside wasn't fire. It was the same steady, unnatural orange glow I'd seen before. It didn't move, didn't speak. It just stood there, holding that light in front of it, the glow washing over the ground. Without touching the trees around us, I stopped about 20 feet away, my hands shaking, my throat dry, and I knew without knowing how that whatever this was, it didn't want me to pass. The hooded shape tilted its head slowly, then raised its free hand pointing back toward the forest. I didn't move at first. I just stood there frozen in the cold air. Then it took one slow step toward me. I could hear the crunch of the dirt under its boot, the sound far too loud in the silence. I stepped back, my heel hitting the edge of the trail, and I knew I was running out of space. Something moved in the trees behind me, another glow coming closer. This one lower to the ground and moving fast. I turned my head and saw a second lantern weaving between the trunks, and then a third off to my right, closing in. My chest felt tight, my ears ringing with my heartbeat. I looked back toward the hooded figure, but it was gone. The path to the trailhead was open now, but those three lights were closing fast. I ran, my boots pounding the dirt, my breath tearing out in the cold and the smell of copper filling my lungs. The light stayed just at the edges of my vision, never falling behind, never getting closer, until the wooden sign came into view and I burst into the gravel. Lodi didn't stop until I was in. My truck door slammed, hands shaking as I turned the key. The headlights cut across the lot. For a split second I saw them, three hooded shapes standing at the edge of the trees. Lanterns held steady in that same dead glow, not moving, not following, just watching as I pulled away. The road felt different on the way back down, like the forest had stretched it longer behind me, the headlights catching glimpses of movement in the ditches that vanished before I could focus on them. I didn't stop. I didn't look back until the highway lights appeared and the dark walls of pine were finally gone. I didn't sleep that night. I left the mountains behind me in the rear view. But every mile the image stayed in my head, those three figures at the edge of the trees, lanterns, casting no light around them, just that unnatural steady orange glow like fire trapped in glass, but without heat. The smell of copper still clinging to the inside of my nose. No matter how many times I rolled the windows down to let in the freezing air, by the time I reached the small town on the far side of the range, the sky was paling into that thin blue that comes before sunrise. I pulled into the lot of a 24-hour diner just to get out of the truck for a while. The place was empty except for the woman behind the counter, her eyes heavy like she'd been there all night. She poured me coffee without asking, and when I took that first sip, she frowned at me like she knew something I did it. "You went up there, didn't you?" she asked. It wasn't a question, more like a statement of fact. Her voice low enough that it didn't carry in the empty room. I didn't answer, but I must have looked guilty, because she shook her head and set the pot down hard enough to rattle the cups. "You don't like it when you leave," she said, and her eyes didn't blink when she said it. I asked her what she meant, but she only wiped the counter in small circles and told me not to go back, not even in daylight. He stayed in that town the rest of the day. My nerves frayed, every shadow on the street making my shoulders tense. By evening, I told myself I'd drive straight home, no detours, no stops. But when I got into my truck, there was something sitting on the passenger seat. It was small, wrapped in brown paper and tied with a thin cord. I didn't remember leaving anything there, and when I touched it, the paper was cold, damp, like it had been left in the snow inside. It was a lantern, not big, maybe the size of my fist, made of some dull black metal and glass that seemed too thick for its size. The glow inside was faint but steady, that same orange I had seen in the woods. It didn't flicker, it didn't change, it just burned in that wrong way. I set it on the asphalt and stepped back, but the glow didn't fade even when I kicked it under the truck and left it there. A drive out of town took me past the turnoff to Devil's Lantern trailhead. Even though I stayed on the main highway, I swear I saw lights moving between the trees, far off the road, matching my pace, just out of reach of my headlights. I kept my eyes forward and my hands tight on the wheel, just tight, like I was breathing through clothing. Thought I had outrun it all, until I pulled into my driveway hours later. The street quiet, the porch light buzzing faintly in the cold, and there it was sitting on my front steps, that same black lantern. The orange glow steady through the glass like it had never been left behind. He didn't touch it, I didn't bring it inside. I sat in my truck watching it until the sky began to lighten again, and then I went inside, locking every door, every window. But that night, when I tried to sleep, the glow came through the blinds, soft and steady, washing the room in that same copper tinged air. It's been 3 nights now. The lantern hasn't moved, but the glow has grown brighter enough that I can see it even with my eyes closed. The smell is stronger too. Sometimes I hear footsteps on the porch, slow, deliberate. Once I heard the sound of something brushing against the siding of the house, like fingers dragging along woodless night. I woke to the sound of breathing just outside my bedroom door, slow and deep, the kind of breath that seems to match your own, until you realize it's not yours. I didn't move, I didn't speak, and for what felt like hours it went quiet. But when I checked the door in the morning, there were marks on the frame, long vertical scratches like the ones on the trees in the trail. I know now that the woman at the diner was right. You can leave the trail, but the trail doesn't leave you. I see the lights at the edge of my yard every night now, 3 of them swaying gently in the dark, and I know it's only a matter of time before they're closer, before I hear my name again pulled apart and stitched back together wrong. And when that happens, I don't think I'll have the strength to turn away, so If you're ever driving through the Bitterroot Mountains and you see that old wooden sign, half hidden in the weeds, do not stop, do not take that first step past the tree line, because once you do, the devil's lantern will find you, and it will follow you home. They say Whisper Creek Trailhead got its name because the water there never sounds like water. Shit, it's not the usual rush or trickle you get from mountain streams. Instead, it sounds like someone whispering to you from just out of sight words. You can't quite make out, but you're sure are meant for you, I always thought. It was just a creepy local tale, one of those campfire things folks use to keep kids from wandering too far into the woods, but that was before last fall, before I decided to take the trail alone in late October when the trees had turned that deep gold, and the air carried the smell of rain and dying Lavesi had driven past the turnoff 100 times. Before a little gravel lot on the side of a 2-lane road with a wooden sign that leaned a little too far to the left, its letters painted white against dark brown planks reading Whisper Creek Trailhead, Allegheny National Forest, Pennsylvania, USA. The boards looked damp even on dry days, and someone had carved initials deep into the post like the wood had been there longer than the highway itself. First steps down the path were quiet, just the crunch of fallen leaves under my boots and the occasional snap of a twig, but the deeper I went, the stranger. It felt like the sound of my own footsteps didn't carry very far, like the air was swallowing them up. The trees there grew tight together, their branches knitting overhead until the sky was nothing but thin strips of pale gray light about half a mile, and I heard it fade at first under the usual forest sounds, the creek. The trail was named for it wound somewhere to my right, hidden behind the slope. But the noise wasn't running water, it was a low murmur like to people talking from a distance. I stopped trying to catch a word or two, but the moment I went still, the sound stopped too. I walked on telling myself it was just the water playing tricks on my erst ground dip toward the creek, and I finally saw it, a narrow stream, maybe 4 feet across, winding through the trees, its surface smooth as glass, even though the water was moving. And there it was again, that whispering sound drifting up from the water. It didn't matter. Where I stood, it always seemed to be coming from just beyond reach, like it was leading me somewhere. I followed the creek for a while, letting it pull me deeper into the forest. The air grew colder, the kind of cold that settles in your bones, and I realized I hadn't heard a single bird or rustle of leaves since I'd gotten near the water. It was like the woods themselves were holding their breath. That's when I saw the first figure, standing on the opposite bank, maybe 30 feet away. It was thin, dressed in what looked like old fashion clothes, dark pants, and a white shirt, sleeves rolled up, its head tilted down like it was listening to the creek. I thought maybe it was another hiker until it turned toward me. I saw its face, or rather the absence of one. The skin was smooth where the eyes and mouth should have been. He stumbled back, my boots slipping on the wet bank. When I looked again, it was gone. No ripple in the water, no sign it had been there at all. But the whispering had grown louder, closer. He kept moving faster, now away from the creek, trying to put distance between me and whatever I had seen. But the trail curved right back toward the water like it wanted me there again. The whispering rose and felt like it was breathing in every now and then. I thought I heard my name woven into it by the time I reached the old footbridge. The sky had gone darker than it should have for late afternoon. The bridge was made of rotting planks, strung together with rusted bolts spanning a section of the creek where the banks were steep. I didn't want to cross it, but the trail didn't give me much choice. Halfway across, I glanced down into the water and froze. There were faces beneath the surface, dozens of them pale and blurred by the current, their mouths moving in slow unison, though I couldn't hear anything over the rush in my ears. I forced myself to keep going, my boots thudding softly on the wood. The far end of the bridge disappearing into shadow, and that's when I heard it from right behind me, a low voice almost in my ear saying plain as day, "Don't look back." I didn't listen. I turned my head just enough to glance over my shoulder. In that moment I wished I had obeyed whatever had spoken, because the bridge behind me was no longer empty. The planks stretched away into a haze of dark air, and in the middle of it stood a figure taller than any person should be, its head bent at an impossible angle to clear the low branches overhead. Its arms hung long, with the hands nearly brushing the planks, the fingers tipped with something sharp and pale. The face was hidden by a wet curtain of hair that dripped slowly onto the wood below. The whispering from the creek swelled loud enough that it drowned out my own breathing. It wasn't coming from beneath the bridge anymore. It was inside my head, each word drawn out slow like it wanted me to savor them. I ran the last few feet off the bridge, my boots hitting the soil hard. The air beyond felt heavier, colder. The trail on this side of the creek looked different, narrower, as if it hadn't been walked in years. The trees bent low on either side, forming a tunnel of tangled limbs and dead leaves. The light had gone strange to a dull greenish tint, like it was filtering through old glass. About 100 yards, and I saw something hanging from one of the branches ahead, a lantern, but not the kind you'd expect on a hiking trail. This one was made of black metal etched with strange curling shapes, and inside the glass a flame flickered in a deep bluish white. It didn't swing with the wind, and when I stepped under it, the air felt thick like I was moving through water. My ears popped, and the whispering stopped all at onset. The silence was worse. My own pulse sounded loud in my head. I kept walking, but after a few steps I realized the ground underfoot had changed from dirt to something smoother. It took me another step to realize it was stone carved with shallow grooves that made patterns to warn. To read, my flashlight beam caught on something ahead, and I stopped it. There was another figure, but not like the faceless one from before. This one was sitting on a low stone ledge just off the trail, its head bowed, its hands clasped together as if in prayer. When it lifted its head, the skin was stretched thin over bone, and the eyes were sunk deep but burning with that same bluish white light as the lantern. It opened its mouth wide, impossibly wide, and I heard the whisper again, only this time it wasn't soft, it was sharp, like a hiss telling me to come closer. I stepped back, and the figure unfolded from its seat, moving in a slow, deliberate way, like it was testing the air between us. The trail behind me had gone dark, not shadowed, but completely gone, like someone had erased it, leaving nothing but the trees pressing closer. I turned forward again, and the figure was standing inches away from me, its mouth still open, but no sound coming out now. The whisper was behind me again, down low near my ear. Bolted to my left, crashing rushing through the undergrowth, branches snapping and clawing at my jacket. The air in the woods felt wrong, like it was thicker with every step. Until it was almost hard to breathe, I stumbled into a clearing and froze. The creek ran straight through it, but the water here wasn't moving. It lay still and black like a mirror reflecting a sky I didn't recognize. No clouds, no stars. Just the dull green glow shapes began to rise beneath the surface, the same faces I'd seen under the bridge, but now their eyes were open and fixed on me there. Mouths moving faster like they were speaking over each other. I backed toward the trees, but my boot caught on something. I looked down and saw a rope thick and rough tied into a loop, half buried in the leaves and leading straight into the water. The whisper came again, softer now, but somehow clearer, and it said my name this time, not twisted or broken, just exactly right, like someone I knew had said it. The sound made my chest ache in a way that had nothing to do with fear. I stood there in the clearing with that rope at my feet and the still black water in front of me. The faces beneath the surface pressing closer, their mouths opening wider, until I could see dark gaps where teeth should have been. My name came again, drifting up from the creek, not loud, not urgent, just steady, like it had been waiting for me. For a very long time, every part of me wanted to run, but my legs felt heavy, as if the damp air itself was holding me in place. The rope shifted slightly, like something beneath the leaves had pulled it toward the water. I knelt without meaning to my fingers, brushing the coarse fibers. It felt warm, as if someone had been holding it in their hands seconds before. Across the creek, the trees bent back, revealing another figure standing at the edge of the bank. It was the same faceless one I had seen earlier, only now its head tilted toward the water as if listening closely. It stepped forward onto the surface without sinking, each step rippling outward but never breaking through the water, its hand slowly lifting toward me. I forced myself to move, stumbling back into the trees. The whispering followed, curling around my ears. No matter which way I turned, the woods had shifted again, paths leading nowhere. The sky above dimming into that same strange green, the air humming low in my chest, like standing too close to a power limit. Through the branches ahead, I saw a light, not bluish white, like the lantern before, but a warm gold that looked almost safe. I pushed toward it, breaking through into another stretch of trail, where an old wooden shelter stood, half collapsed, its roof sagging inside. The glow came from a single candle. Sitting in the middle of the floor, around it were objects laid out carefully. The leather boot caked with mud, a photograph damp and curling at the edges, a pocket knife, but the blade snapped off, each one looking like it had been left here by someone who never came back. The candle flame bent suddenly as though a breath had passed over it, and I heard movement in the far corner of the shelter. Slow, deliberate, something dragging across the floor. I turned my flashlight toward it and saw a shadow rise tall and thin, its head brushing the rafters, though the shape didn't match the space it was in. The whispering filled the shelter walls, pressing against me. From all, Desi stepped back out into the trail, but the shelter was gone, replaced by the creek again, this time narrower and faster, the water rushing hard enough to spray cold mist against my face. In the middle of the stream stood the hooded figure, its hands holding nothing now, just open palms facing me, as if offering something unseen. Its hood shifted slightly and I glimpsed nothing beneath it, just darkness. so deep it seemed to pull my eyes inside it. The rushing water began to slow its sound, fading into the same low murmur that had followed me since the start. The banks of the creek rose higher, trees leaning in their branches, forming a canopy that blocked out whatever remained of the sky. Shapes moved along the far edge of my vision. Never still, never fully seen, the air was heavy with the smell of wet earth, and something faintly metallic. Then from behind me came a sound that froze my breath. The creak, a wooden plank under weight like the bridge far back at the start. Only closer, much closer. I turned slowly and saw it stretching away into darkness, planks disappearing into a mist that hadn't been there before. At the far end, a single lantern burned that deep bluish white, its light steady and waiting. You don't remember choosing to walk toward it, but my feet carried me step after step, the whisper growing louder, the mist curling around my legs, the lantern ahead never getting nearer until suddenly it was just in front of me, the glass catching my reflection, and for the briefest moment, I thought I saw another face in it, pale, watching. When I reached out, the glass was cold, my fingertips tracing the edge, and the whisper stopped, replaced by silence so deep I could hear my own heartbeat. The lantern went dark. In that pitch black, something leaned close enough that I could feel the breath against my ear. It said in a voice I knew down to my bones, "Welcome home." I woke on the bank of the creek, the sky pale like early morning, my clothes damp with dew, the trail behind me looking exactly as it had when I started, only my boots were heavier, caked in black mud. When I looked down, in my hand I was holding the rope from the clearing. The loop tied perfectly, left the forest without looking back. But when I reached my truck, there was something in the bed, sitting in plain view, a small black lantern etched with those same curling shapes from before. Inside it, the bluish white flame burned steady and cold, and I knew without touching it that no matter how far I drove, it would be waiting for me somewhere ahead.